All right. One episode down. We're on to episode 2. How you feeling, my man?
I'm doing great. We just got done with a busy week of sports, especially in basketball. So yeah, I'm ready to dive right in.
My goodness, my good. Yeah, definitely with Selection Sunday, it's one of the best days of the year. I always get super excited. I get my notebook out. I start writing a bunch of notes. I start listing all the teams as they read them out. One thing I loved that CBS did was give a little shout out to Greg Gumbel, the
Yes,
late Greg
absolutely.
Gumbel. Man, not hearing his voice on Selection Sunday is different. Every year we would hear his voice come on there, and we knew like it was March. It was March Madness, and we were about to see some really good basketball. So I like that they gave him a little tribute. If it was 15 seconds longer, I would have shed a tear, I swear. But yeah, good on them for shouting them out, but then getting right to the picks. Like it was quick. They went right to it. Didn't take much time at all. A lot of good stuff coming out of Selection Sunday with the round of 64. But one of the biggest stories to come out of all of this was North Carolina getting in as a first four team. A lot of controversy around it. They edge out teams like Indiana and West Virginia for that spot in the tournament, as well as Xavier getting in. Um, you know, Big conversation around those two is that they have a combined 2 wins in the quad one. So, not sure what the committee was thinking when they put those two teams in. Definitely want to get your thoughts on those selections.
So I think West Virginia has the case of being the biggest snub in the last several years. And I say this because they do that bracket matrix thing right before
Hmm.
they uh, on Selection Sunday, which basically it takes the 111 best bracketologists and looks at all their brackets right before the show, and compares them to the afterwards what the selection committee ultimately decides. And West Virginia was in all 111 of those brackets. So yeah, the committee went against 100% of what. I mean, that's the committee's either saying all those guys are idiots, or there's this new standard that the selection committee's going by that we don't really know about that behind closed doors. Obviously, the North Carolina is a big story, and doesn't help that their AD is supposedly sitting in there. Claims he's not sitting in the room when they're just talking about UNC, but that doesn't mean those guys aren't good friends with him. Like, do they go out to the bar with him afterwards? I'm
Right,
sure they do.
subconsciously, like whether it's intentional or not, they could have that bias towards North
Yeah,
Carolina just
like
by being associated with him and
yeah. I mean,
spending any sort of time with him.
yeah. Some people think he's lying. It wasn't in there. I mean, he could be telling the truth, but that doesn't take away
Yeah,
from the fact that yeah, they would have bias because of that. Um, but I think North Carolina is getting all the talk of why they shouldn't be in, but because of that, people are overlooking Xavier, and I'm glad you brought that up because yeah, Xavier is in the exact same boat to me as UNC. Yeah, no, lacking quad one wins. I will say Xavier. Both teams have been playing better down the stretch. Um, I would say UNC was beating up on mostly quad three, quad two
hmm
teams. Uh, Xavier in the same boat. I can't remember if they got their lone quad one. I know that was against Marquette, and then that kind of uh, Marquette may have moved down after a few games later. I think
yeah.
Marquette was in that stretch. That was when their lone quad one win was. But um, that shouldn't put them in over West Virginia or
Right,
Indiana.
right, and it
Um,
was it was interesting hearing when they interviewed the couple of committee members, one of which was Bubba Cunningham, the UNC athletic director, and when they were talking about North Carolina, they mentioned the 8-0 record against Quad Two, which was an interesting stat to rattle off, considering Quad Two wins are never referred to for most other teams, but they found that as a reason for keeping North Carolina in this field.
well, and that contradicts Indiana not being in because
Right.
Indiana was 4-13 quad one, which is much better than 1-11. Indiana was undefeated in quads 2, 3, and 4, and North Carolina had one quad 3 loss. So yeah, that logic doesn't really apply. That was kind of a lame excuse. I kind of wish that CBS. I saw them interview on CBS and ESPN.
Mm.
I'm sure I'm sure they wanted to press back on him, push back on him, but they probably were contractually obliged
Right.
not to
Right.
do that. But because yeah, they were giving some weak arguments.
To make matters worse, the West Virginia governor, Patrick Morrisey, he kind of spoke about it in a press conference. He said West Virginia deserved to be in the NCAA tournament. National Corrupt Athletic Association is what he claimed the NCAA to be. This was a miscarriage of justice and robbery at the highest levels. That's a little harsh, I would say, for a team that ultimately is in a play-in game for the tournament. Obviously, whatever you want to say about North Carolina being in or not, I don't know that at the end of the day it makes much of a difference in terms of the whole tournament altogether and the outcomes. But it is, taking the opportunity away from West Virginia, a team that probably deserved it more than UNC did.
Yeah, by tomorrow when the games start, we're gonna forget about it. But
Exactly.
I will say though, most brackets didn't even have West Virginia in the play-in game though. They had them comfortably in as like a 10 seed.
Really?
So that really came out of nowhere. Their snub came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It was always going to be between Texas, Xavier, North Carolina, San Diego State, and then Boise State and IU, and then Ohio State. Absolute long shot, but they were in the discussion.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, West Virginia governor has every right to be mad. But I will say though, the committee has shown biases to bubble ACC teams in the past. Last year, Virginia
Mm-hmm.
got in and they put up an absolutely pathetic first four game. Notre Dame was the year before that. They probably didn't belong in the tournament, but they were put in. So, I mean, we probably should have seen it coming.
Yeah.
uh, but I mean, I do think North Carolina could be one of those low-seeded ACC teams that could make a little run, though.
Yeah. Make a little noise, right?
Just by history, because we've
Yeah.
seen those in the past. So
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that they also brought up Tucker DeVries for West Virginia, their star player that's been out for most of the year, as a reason for not allowing them in when you have teams like Memphis who their star player is going to be out for that at least that first round of the tournament, as well as Keyshawn Gilbert for Iowa State, and then obviously we don't know the status of Cooper Flagg right now at this point, but you're contradicting yourself over the reasons why you're keeping teams in and not allowing others in.
well, that's just another horrible excuse. I mean, some people compare it to like the Jordan Travis thing with Florida State. Well,
Right.
no, that was at the end of the season.
Yeah.
This happened in early December. He didn't even play a
They
single conference game yet, and they got a couple quality wins without him.
they
Like
proved that they could win without him.
they beat. I mean, they weren't a great team by any means
Yeah.
without him, but clearly a tourney team. And yeah, they beat Kansas. I think they may have beaten Iowa State too. I know they beat Kansas on the road. That was a huge win, but without DeVries. But yeah, that was another excuse that didn't make much sense to me.
Yeah. So looking at the rest of the round of 64, wanted to see like what some of the best matchups that you're seeing in this first round. I know we got some legend coaches going up against each other in round one with Bill Self and John Calipari of Arkansas. What do you see on this bracket?
So yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, Calipari versus Self with the right to play. Most likely Richard Pitino after that. So it's a good 4-team tournament right there. I think that's in Providence. Uh, the first game of the tournament on Thursday is going to be Louisville Creighton, and I think that's going to be a spectacular game. I think both teams are underseeded, Louisville especially. And yeah, that could be a really good game with the Louisville. I mean, when you go 18-2 in your conference and you have some dominant non-conference wins, they're a legit team. I felt sorry for them because I feel like they should have been more in the 5-6 range.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Bit of a tough draw for Auburn come second round. Whoever they end up getting with Louisville and Creighton. Louisville's a tough out. Let's stay in that South region. I know as far as upsets go, when I was looking at this bracket, it's always tough to pick the upsets. You never know where they're going to come from, but most likely you will see a 12 take down a 5. I don't see it in this one. I think Michigan coming off the Big Ten tournament championship, I think is coming in with a lot of steam, a lot of momentum. But I do see in the Texas A&M Yale matchup, uh, Yale possibly taking down Texas A&M. A&M's been a bit of an up and down team all year. They're very bit of a frustrating team, honestly. They get really good wins and then they have really bad losses. They're just very up and down. I see a Yale team who is one of the top 5 teams in the nation in field goal percentage, being able to do some really good things and make a lot of noise in that first round matchup.
yeah, Texas A&M's. There's if you rank the SEC teams by tiers, Texas A&M is in the one where when they're on their A game, they're one of the best teams in the country, but when they're not, they're very beatable. So, and Yale's a very good team. I forget what their big guy's name is, but he could easily. He's a good Danny Wolf replacement, and they got that Jaconis. Is that how you pronounce his last name? They're really good.
Yeah.
He's an absolute sniper, and he torched Auburn last year. It's funny that Yale's in the exact same part of the bracket as they were last year, and against another SEC team. But yeah, the Michigan UC San Diego. I think Michigan is clearly the better team. I think the Wolf, uh, Golden 7-foot duo would be tough for any team to guard. But the one thing that Michigan does not have going for them is that they played Sunday. They just got done playing 3 games in a row, and they only have a few days rest. They're going out to Denver on a Thursday. So, and against arguably the best 12 seed in the bracket, UC San Diego or McNeese State. I'm sure we'll talk about McNeese in a little bit. But so yeah, I like Michigan. Michigan's a better team, but the outside factors kind of, I don't know, make that prediction cloudy for me. I went with Michigan, but I could see that going either way. I will say this about the whole South region.
Yep.
So this was the first region they mentioned on the broadcast, and I thought it was so poorly seeded. I thought, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? With the luckily, I thought the other 3 regions were more accurately seeded, but starting off with Auburn as the overall number 1 seed, I have Auburn in the final game, but I don't think Auburn deserves the number 1 overall seed. I think Duke has a better record than them, is higher in the net and on KenPom than Auburn, and has the head-to-head over Auburn. And I would also go as far to say Florida has a better case to be the number 1 overall than Auburn because they have a better record than Auburn. They won their conference tournament, and they beat Auburn head-to-head at Auburn. So I just, and people were saying before how, oh yeah, Auburn could do whatever they want in their conference tournament. They're going to be the number 1 overall.
Right.
It made me go by thinking that they don't even take conference tournaments into consideration. And that goes with the Michigan being a 5 seed. They were under Purdue, who was a 4, and Maryland, who was a 3, and Maryland was a 4, and Wisconsin, who was a 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
They just beat all 3 of those teams. Purdue, they've beaten twice. Yeah, it's almost like some of these bigger conferences, they just decided before the conference tournament started where they were going to be seeded.
Yeah, you would think they'd have like contingency brackets for outcomes of conference tournaments. It's clear that they did not take that into account with Michigan seeding, and honestly, that hurts Auburn even more. The fact that it kind of stacks up their part of the bracket when they're supposed to have that overall number 1 seed bracket with the best path to the Final Four. I don't see it as the easiest path by a long shot. but yeah, that kind of didn't give Michigan their best seeding that they should have gotten.
No, no. But another thing in the South, though, I think Michigan State might have one of the easier draws of a 2 seed to get to the Elite Eight,
Yeah,
especially since Iowa State lost one of their better players. He's not going to be playing in the tournament. So,
yeah. And that
yeah,
was one of the big things when I was filling out this part of the bracket was trying to find a spot where Michigan State would lose because they're not a great shooting team. They do a really good job of controlling the pace of the game, playing good defense, as all Tom Izzo teams do, but not being able to make shots at a really high clip. I kept trying to find a spot where they would lose, and I just couldn't find it until I got them matched up against Auburn in the Elite Eight.
yeah. 2 months ago, Marquette would have been a great, a great second round
Yeah,
matchup with Michigan State, but they've kind of faltered here as of late. And I'm just mentioned Iowa State. Ole Miss is in the same realm as Texas A&M. Of when they're at their best, they are really good, and I feel like Ole Miss's best could definitely beat Michigan State head to head, but that hasn't shown up too often lately. So yeah, I think Michigan State might have the easiest path for any 2 seed to get to the Elite Eight.
yeah. And speaking on Iowa State, I mentioned earlier about Keyshawn Gilbert being out. Um, he was ruled out for the season. It's a pretty big blow for that team as their second leading scorer on their team. How do you think that affects them? Do you think they can still get out of that first weekend and then maybe be matched up with Michigan State after that, or do you think they could falter earlier on?
Yeah, I think they still can. I'm assuming they'll get past Lipscomb. Yeah, they'll pair up with either Ole Miss or the UNC San Diego State. Um, yeah, that kind of go back to Ole Miss. You just don't know what version of them you'll get, and Chris Beard has a proven track record in March, so that might scare Iowa State some. And but yeah, I think they'll for sure beat Lipscomb, but
Yeah,
their ceiling definitely dramatically dropped after that injury announcement, which is kind of sad because
yeah.
at times Iowa State was definitely one of the top 3 teams in the country.
Yeah, and Ole Miss being one of 14 SEC teams to make it to the tournament, they wipe out the record set by the Big East in 2011 when they had 11 teams make the tournament, but 14 teams. I mean, that's really impressive. Uh, you know, you wonder how all the teams will fare. Given that I remember a few years ago with the Big Ten, they had a lot of teams make the tournament. They beat each other up during the regular season, and more than half of them didn't make it out of the first weekend. So it'll be interesting to see how the SEC teams fare. Let's move over to the East. This is Duke's bracket. They are the number one seed listed here. I love their path to the Final Four. I have them easily making it to the Final Four. Interested to see if you feel the same way, but seeing as though Alabama is a little banged up, and just looking at the other top seeds. Wisconsin, I wouldn't say is a very strong 3 seed. If it was Michigan, I would think a little bit differently. Arizona is up and down. You never know what you're going to get from Caleb Love. And yeah, it just doesn't seem like one of the stronger brackets. And to me, I mentioned to you, I texted, after the selections were made, I said Auburn got the overall number one seed, but it looked like Duke got the overall number one seed bracket.
Yeah, and I think we discussed this last week of how it really last week or before how the number 1 overall seed, there's really not much to be had if you're the number 2 overall seed compared with it, unless you're like 2 teams that are right next to each other geographically and like you missed out on a good location. But that wasn't the case here. But absolutely, Duke has a great path to the Final Four. They definitely have the easiest 8-9 teams to deal with, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I feel like the 8 seeds. If you rank the 7 and the 8 seeds, I think the top 3 of those would be 8 seeds. I think Louisville, UConn, and Gonzaga would all be the 3 best of the 7 and 8s. But Mississippi State is nowhere. I think they're in a tier below Texas A&M and Ole Miss. To me, they did beat Ole Miss in the regular season, but they don't really scare me too much. Especially, I can't imagine they'd scare Duke. Same with Baylor. Uh, they have VJ Edgecombe, but And Scott Drews obviously won a national title with Baylor, but I mean they're 19 and 14. It's kind of a similar situation to Rutgers, where you have NBA. Well, in Rutgers' case, you had two top NBA prospects, but that doesn't ultimately mean you have a good team. Same with Baylor; they have a projected top 5 pick, but when you're 19 and 14,
Yeah.
shouldn't scare anyone. But I will say, I have Akron upsetting Arizona, and the
Really?
reason I have that because, like you said, the Caleb Love thing. I could be dead wrong. Caleb Love could go off. Like I could see that easily
Yeah,
happening.
you never know with him.
But the complete opposite could happen too. That's what I'm banking on here with my prediction. I think Oregon could give Duke a good matchup. Duke will win that, but Oregon's a veteran team, and I just saw a stat the other day, which is truly unbelievable when you think about it. Since 2010, Oregon has the most wins of any team in the country in the month of March.
Wow.
More than Duke, Kansas, North Carolina, Kentucky. Yeah, so Dana Altman's teams always play peak in March, it seems like. And yeah, I could see them playing Duke well, but I think Duke's just too deep. Alabama, their defense is just too lackluster. I could see that Duke Bama game being
They can put up a lot of points, but they're going to allow a lot of points as well.
that. And I don't know. Duke has one of the best defenses in the country. And I know Alabama will still score a lot of points, but I don't know if they've played a defense as good as Duke. So I have that as the Elite Eight matchup, frankly, because yeah, Wisconsin doesn't really frighten
So
me too much as a
this is the
32.
bracket where I went a little wild and crazy. So if you look at the 6-11 matchup, BYU against VCU, read up a little bit on VCU. I didn't get to watch them a ton throughout the year. I wasn't really paying attention, but the Rams, they consistently run out multiple 6'10" big men and have 4 seniors in the starting lineup, all of whom average double-digit scoring. They're pretty good at 3-pointers. They grabbed 37% of their misses, which is top 15 in Division One. I picked this as a big upset over BYU, and then I continued that as a upset over Wisconsin in the second round. So I had them facing Alabama. Ultimately, had them defeating Alabama in that Sweet 16 matchup to give kind of Duke that easy access to the Final Four. I just too many up and down teams, Wisconsin, Bama. I just don't see them as making long runs through the tournament. So yeah, VCU is my big Cinderella story. I wonder what your thoughts were on them.
Well, so to our listeners, we did not discuss our brackets with each other beforehand. I also had VCU going. I had VCU going to the Sweet 16. Yeah, I had them beating BYU, and I had them defeating Wisconsin.
That's awesome.
I did watch them play Sunday, and they're another good defensive team. But yeah, you're right. The 16, yeah, they just height that they
Yeah.
usually bring, and yeah, with Wisconsin, yeah, them under Greg Gard they haven't really performed well in the tournament.
Yeah.
And they're a different Wisconsin team. They're almost SEC like this year when of how many points they score per game. So that they do have that going for them when compared to their past few years in the tourney. But yeah, you got to have some upsets in your bracket, and that's what also had VCU going to the Sweet 16. I do have Bama though, eventually taking down the Rams to get to the Elite Eight. Though.
And you mentioned Oregon being a tough contest for Duke potentially. I ended up having Liberty over them. I read up a little bit on them as well. I decided to take them as one of my 12 seeds that I mentioned. I kind of went 50-50 on the 12 seeds. This was one of them. Very likely that we will see a 5 seed go down, as a number 5 seeds have won 64.7% of their meetings with 12 seeds, but at least 112 has defeated a 5 seed in 33 of 39 tournaments. So it's very likely, for our listeners, if you're making brackets out there, which if you're listening here, you probably are, take at least one of them. It's bound to happen.
Definitely.
Moving down to the Midwest, this is where Houston grabbed the number 1 seed in this region. With this one, it was tough for me to find upsets. I know there's probably going to be one or two that happened in that first round, but for me, it just felt likely that all the top seeds in this bracket would make it into the next weekend. That's where I got a little crazy with the bracket. Interested to hear your thoughts on it.
So Midwest region, that 1-8 matchup, assuming the Gonzaga Bulldogs beat the Georgia Bulldogs, that's going to be a fun game. Gonzaga, like I said, was better than all the 7 seeds, so I think they were underseeded, and they're also high in the net and the
Mm-hmm.
KenPom, which also kind of confused me
It
because
was very surprising me when I saw that.
they usually use that as a big reference. The committee usually makes that as a big reference when they make the brackets, so that'll be a good game. So the most common upset, or one of the most common upsets I hear lately, well, both in this bracket with McNeese State and Clemson, and then High Point and Purdue, especially High Point and Purdue. And I've gone back and forth on that 4-13 matchup because Purdue's not been playing well at all. Braden Smith, with how good he is, he's clearly dealing with fatigue or some sort of injury because he's slowed down a lot, and I can't really blame him because Painter plays him 40 minutes a game. So, and he's all the offense. But yeah, this Purdue team has shown tendencies of those Purdue teams in the recent memory who have been upset by much lower seeds. The one thing I will say though that goes in Purdue's favor is that every year there's always that one pick that everyone jumps on for the upset. Last year it was McNeese State over Gonzaga. Everyone was like, "Oh yeah, it's a shoe in. Fill that in right now." And Gonzaga absolutely demolished them.
Yeah.
That's happened several times in the past. So yeah, I I really don't. I keep going back and forth with who I want. Some brackets I have High Point, some I have Purdue. But speaking of McNeese State, though, once again they're in the 5-12 matchup. Hopefully they can put up a better fight this year. I think this Clemson team is they're good, but they're a little worse than last year's Gonzaga team. I will say though, we're talking about Louisville being underranked, underseeded. I mean, um, yeah, I really don't understand how Clemson is 3 seeds ahead of them, considering they let's see, Clemson 27-6, Louisville 27-7. Louisville just beat Clemson in the ACC tourney, so this once again shows that I don't think the committee cares much about the Power 5 conference tournaments very much.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned the Houston Gonzaga matchup. That's where things got weird for me. And I know the history of Gonzaga. They usually peter out later in the tournament, but they've made 9 straight Sweet 16s. I went ahead and took them to the Sweet 16 for a 10th straight year. Mark Few just he knows what he's doing there. He always develops really good teams and within his program. And Houston has failed me too many times in past seasons as a 1 seed as well. So that was my big upset in that part of the region. But yeah, the Purdue High Point, I kind of thought about it because of recent memory with the team. You think back to Fairleigh Dickinson, and it makes you want to take them as an upset here. But knowing that Braden Smith and a lot of those other players on the current team were on that team from 2 years ago, I can't see them allowing a team to surprise them. I guess is what I should say. I don't see that as an outcome in the first round. It could always happen. It's Purdue. You never know, but I think they'll at least get through that first round. I do have Clemson beating them in the next round because I've seen some good things from Clemson throughout the season. I know early on in the year in the non-conference, they did beat Kentucky in a tough game on their home floor. So I see them as kind of a sleeper pick in this tournament to make the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I have them in the Sweet 16 as well. That Gonzaga fact is true, and they've kind of had in that span they've had really good teams and some really good and just good teams. This team this year is definitely in the lower tier of their greatness that they've had in the last decade or so. I went with Houston, but I understand your logic with that pick. Um, Moving on to the bottom half of the Midwest region. Um, I am praying that we get an Illinois Kentucky round of 32 game, because that that game could go any different outcome you could think of, and it wouldn't surprise me. Those are the two most up and down teams, especially Illinois. Uh, Illinois, their results have been crazy all year. They'll get blown out by Duke, and then they'll blow out someone good in the Big Ten. And they played Tennessee really close this year.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and Kentucky's pretty similar. In the past, I forget how long this is going back. Maybe like no, maybe entirety of conference play. They never won three or lost three in a row. So
Really?
so you really don't know what you're getting with Mark Pope's Kentucky team. Unfortunately, they do have injuries, but they've been dealing with that for a while now, so
Yeah.
they're used to it. But yeah, I really hope we get that matchup. Troy could pull an Oakland from
That's the
last
worry
year.
with Kentucky. I kind of, that
Yeah.
was gnawing at me at the back of my mind, just thinking about past seasons where they've had first round exits. I ended up taking them in the first round to move on, just because it is a different culture. It's Mark Pope. It's not the Calipari freshman team that they're used to throwing out there. This is an experienced team with a lot of transfers, and I like what Mark Pope's done. Earlier in the year, I would have considered him for Coach of the Year. Up and down conference play, it kind of changed that. But I think he's done a really good job in his first season. I think, with his, coaching and their experience, I think they should be able to at least get through a first round against a mid major.
Yeah, I actually have them in the Elite Eight, but like I said, they're unpredictable because they beat Tennessee twice this year, and you can go with the logic that yeah, but
Third time's the charm
third time's a charm
for
for
Tennessee.
Tennessee, but Tennessee is just cursed in March. They could not break that Final Four barrier, and I know that would be a Sweet 16 matchup, but still, I see them uh, going through a hiccup in the Sweet 16 against Kentucky, and I did take Houston into the Final Four from the Midwest region. Um, Tennessee should get by that UCLA Utah State winner pretty easily, in my opinion.
Yeah, I wonder what Mick Cronin thinks about having to travel to Lexington.
Yeah.
Earlier in the year, he's been complaining a ton about the fact that UCLA is in the Big Ten, and he's looked out the plane window and saw the Statue of Liberty too many times, and he's just had a lot of good moments on the mic this year. But I did have Kentucky, Tennessee in the Sweet 16, but ultimately I went with the logic of three times the charm for Tennessee, and just knowing the up and down nature of Kentucky, I ended up taking Tennessee into the Elite Eight against Gonzaga, and that's where I finally let Tennessee break that barrier into the Final Four. So far, I've got Auburn, Duke, Tennessee as three of my spots in the Final Four.
Yeah, I guess I need to. Yeah, I have I have Auburn, Duke, and Houston, so the 3-1 seeds. But spoiler alert, that'll change in the West region when we talk about that.
Yeah. So looking at the West region, this is where Florida got in with a number one seed, the final number one seed in this tournament after a win in their conference tournament. This was the one time when the committee actually used the conference tournament as a factor, I feel like. But looking at the bracket, this to me is the bracket of coaching legends. You've got Dan Hurley, number 8 UConn, the 8 seed UConn. You've got a matchup between Bill Self's Kansas and John Calipari's Arkansas, and then finally at the 2 seed, storming back the Red Storm with Rick Pitino as the main man, the coach of that team, taking them out of mediocrity, worse than that, just pile of dirt in St. John's in New York. But he's brought him back in a big way, a 30-4 record coming into the tournament. Your thoughts?
Yeah, impressive season by St. John's, especially Big East play. They were good in the non-conference, but nothing like screaming, "Oh, this is going to be a number 2 seed in the tournament." But yeah, they dominated Big East play this year. They swept UConn, won their conference tourney, won the regular season title too in the Big East. So props to them. Yeah, everywhere Patino goes, they will make the tournament sometime. How big, how small, they will be relevant.
Yep.
So yeah, overall thoughts of this region. So the Florida UConn. That was I didn't know where to go with that one because last year was the first year in a while where the 4-1 seeds made it to the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
That usually doesn't happen. So I was thinking about that because I already had Auburn and Duke and Houston in the Sweet 16. But I've watching Florida play here recently. There's no team hotter. You could argue Duke, but um, so I went with Florida. Uh, Hurley's team definitely has some flaws this year that the previous champions did not. Um, but I do have Maryland beating them in the Sweet 16, and actually, I have Maryland coming out of the West region. That was my upset. Some of my thinking there was, yeah, I can't have four number one seeds in the
Right.
Final Four, even though I do think if there was a year for that to happen again, because I think the last time that happened was '08 in the Derrick Rose, Mario Chalmers year.
Yeah.
Um, this would be the year just because I feel like all the ones all the one seeds are at a tier above everyone else. But yeah, that probability of that's pretty unlikely. So yeah, I went with Maryland, who uh, every game they're in, they either win or it's just going to be come down to the wire. Um, they've they're just behind Michigan State for me in the Big Ten for best teams in the Big Ten. I'm a Purdue fan. I was really happy that Purdue got to play them early before Christmas because after Christmas they seem to catch
That's
fire,
when they
and
really turned it on.
that's when they really turn it on. Now they don't have any bench support or hardly any bench support whatsoever, so that could go against them. But yeah, I do have Maryland advancing in the West region.
That's awesome, man. I actually did have Maryland taking down Florida in the Sweet 16. Ultimately, I ended up with St. John's. I just think it's a team of destiny coming out of that out of that West region to face Auburn in the Final Four. Um, I think the game I'll be looking forward to most is Kansas Arkansas. A couple teams that have been a bit of a disappointment throughout the season. Injuries, happen throughout the year as well. But Boogie Flan expected to be back for Arkansas should make it that matchup a little bit more interesting. I did have Kansas ultimately, just because of the size of Hunter Dickinson down low. I feel like he's going to be a little bit too much for Arkansas to deal with. My big upsets in this bracket, you're looking at Colorado State over Memphis. Again, another 12 seed that I was really looking at. Memphis without their star Tyrese Hunter. So I just think that that's going to be a big blow for them for the first round, as well as I went back and forth on the Missouri and Drake, mainly because I watched Drake and Bradley in the Missouri Valley Conference Championship. Drake's got a really good score on their squad, but seen a lot of Missouri this year as well in a really tough SEC. I think they're gonna make some noise ultimately, but I got them avoiding an upset against a good Drake team.
Yeah, I also took Colorado State over Memphis. I was saying earlier about how there's always that one upset that everyone claims is going to happen, and then the complete
It
opposite
doesn't.
happens. The difference with this one, though, is that Colorado State's actually favored in this game, so it really wouldn't even be an upset.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I went with that. And then that makes Maryland's path easier to get to the Sweet 16. Yeah, I also took Missouri over Drake. I actually, yeah, you'll disagree with this. I had all ones and twos in the Sweet 16, and I knew that just wouldn't happen. So I did not want to do this, but I took Kansas over St. John's.
Oh.
Um, this would make perfect sense if it was a bracket from 3 months ago, but the way Kansas has been playing, yeah, it did not. I did not want to do that, but
I
man, I
considered it. I think initially on my bracket, I had them beating them just because looking at St. John's field goal percentages from just in general, and as well, especially from the 3-point line, it really stood out in a big way. But I know just the coaching done by Rick Pitino, the pressing that they do throughout a game on and off, and just defensively, they're so well rounded, almost like a Tom Izzo Michigan State team. But yeah, at 30-4, they've had pretty impressive season. But yeah, I had Kansas initially taking them down just because I feel like even though Kansas hasn't, has struggled at times throughout this season, I feel like Bill Self kind of just thinks towards the tournament. And at this point, he's been to so many that he doesn't really care as much about the regular season, and so his team might turn up in March.
I did have Missouri. Then I have Missouri beating Texas Tech, and that one I went back and forth on because I've seen Texas Tech play this year. They got a pretty good ball club, but
Yep.
I took the upset with Missouri. Then I have Missouri beating Kansas in the Sweet 16. So I have I have a 4 versus a 6 in the Elite Eight, which I think is the exact same. Yeah, that was Alabama and Clemson last year, ironically. So in that bottom left corner of the bracket. So um, I just now thought of that. But yeah, so Maryland, yeah, is my one non-number one seed in the Final Four. We've seen 3 1 seeds in the Final Four in the past, so I'm hoping that comes true this year for my
and
bracket's sake.
and it was hard not to take the 1 seeds. I feel like this year more so than past seasons, you'd always see the top team as the overall number one, a good team at that second number 1 seed, but there was a bit of a drop off once you got to the bottom 2 1 seeds. I feel like in this season the 1 seeds have a bit of a tighter discrepancy in their talent and their overall level of play that I think all 4 of them could, make it to the Final Four, and it wouldn't be a shock to me.
Yeah, if you look at Ken Palm, the net ratings, Duke, Florida, Houston, and Auburn in that order are all pretty close together, and then there's a little drop off, and then you get to Tennessee, who's
Right.
number 5. So
Right.
yeah,
There is a cream of the crop this year within the tournament and with the teams that populate it, and I feel like these 1 seeds are better than most that we've had in past seasons.
yeah.
So looking at the Final Four, so I've got Auburn matched up against St. John's, the Johnnies, and then Duke against Tennessee on the other side. Tell me who you have and then who your picks are.
So I had Auburn, Maryland, Duke, and Houston, and when I got to that Final Four, I actually thought about it more, and I do like it because I like that all 4 teams are from a different conference. Um, I took Auburn over Maryland. That ends Maryland's run, and then Duke, Houston. I before I filled out my bracket, I thought I was going to take Duke all the way because that's probably the team other than Purdue. That's probably the team I've watched most this year, and yeah, they're outstanding. It's probably uh, I don't know if I'll put them better than that 15 Kentucky team with the
Towns, was that the one with Towns on
that
it?
was that was that team that had the blue platoon and white platoon.
Oh
They
yeah.
had because they're just absolutely stacked. Um, Obviously, I think that team will end up with better NBA players overall, but that Duke team's right there with them when the maturity of the freshmen that they have. The amazing defense they play, but when I got to that Duke Houston matchup, I know Houston's not been. They have made the Final Four under Sampson, but haven't had much luck here lately. Last year was unfortunate because they lost their best player in the tournament, so that kind of ended their season. But I actually went with Houston over Duke.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, I didn't think I was going to do that, but I mean, you just look at Houston; they're 30-3, I believe, 30-4. They ran through the Big 12 like it was nothing. Uh, uh, all their losses were close, and yeah, I know Duke's kind of in that same boat. Duke's almost in that exact same boat, but I just went with Houston. I think the veterans of Houston would take down Duke in a very very close game, probably a low scoring game too.
Yeah.
Um, and then I actually took Houston over Auburn in the championship. I think this is the year Houston finally gets it done.
Awesome, awesome. So you have Houston breaking through. I did have Duke taking down Tennessee since I had them coming out of the Midwest. I just think Duke all around, they just have the most talent coming into this tournament. Cooper Flag injury pending. I don't think the ankle sprain is too big of a deal. I think he should be ready to go. Honestly, I would sit him out against the 16 seed just to give him an extra couple days. But yeah, I see them making it all the way to the Final Four, down to the championship. I got Auburn and Duke. Auburn's going to take down the Johnnies. What a season for them! I think they'd be pretty happy with a Final Four appearance. But Auburn and Duke, these are the two best teams all year long, in my opinion. You got Auburn, well coached by Bruce Pearl, very experienced. They're a bit of, really old team actually for college standards, and a lot of experience on the team. And then you got Duke on the other side, just all the talent oozing off of that team. And they have so many guys that are probably going to make big splashes in the next level. But I ultimately went with Duke. I just think with all the metrics, everything points to them. I see their path being pretty easy getting into the Final Four. And then they've already had the head-to-head win against Auburn, so I think it's going to ring true again in the national championship.
Yeah, I think for me, Duke and Houston was my championship, basically, because I feel like both those teams would beat Auburn in the title game. But,
Yeah.
but yeah, I just saw a defensive slugfest coming in that game, and Houston squeaking by. But I will say about the Cooper Flag thing, if he's if he's cleared to go, I wouldn't sit him, but I would put him on a restriction just to
Minutes
get him
restriction, yeah.
minutes restriction just to get him going. Um, I would imagine that neither American nor Mount St. Mary's would put up much of a fight. I mean, I don't think they're Fairleigh Dickinson or UMBC like, but you never know. But Duke's arguably the best team in the country, so that should they wouldn't need Flag in that game, obviously, because I mean,
Yeah,
they
no.
they won with that. They won. In fact, you could argue they won in spite of him in the
Yeah.
ACC 30, because when he was in, they weren't playing very well. They were down 8 to Georgia Tech, and then he went out, and then
Yeah.
they played well in the final 3 games. But I put on a minutes restriction to get them ready for their 8-9 matchup, where it could be a little more unpredictable.
Awesome. So, I mean that's it. That's the bracket right there for you. Your thoughts, just like ultimately all together, how well the layout looks in terms of the matchups. I think we got a lot of good first round matchups going on here that we're going to see in the next couple days. If we're looking, for big upsets, again, 12 seeds usually come through, one or two of them each year. If you can call it an upset, the 6-11, it's a little bit closer, but I do like taking some 11 seeds as well.
Yeah, so looking at my final bracket, I had 112 over 5, and I actually had 2 13s over 4, so I went a little bold.
There you go.
But yeah, you never know. And yeah, how many 11 seeds? I think I only had one 11 seed win. I feel like the 6-11, I feel like it's either a lot one way or a lot the other. Like I feel like
Yeah.
there's been years where like multiple 11 seeds won, and I think next bracket, 11 wins a lot, and then all the 6 seeds win.
It's
So
it's very tempting to take them. Obviously, I did have VCU going out to the Elite Eight to face Duke, and then considered Drake very heavily. Don't like either of the play-in teams coming in, since those are 11 seeds, playing in for that spot. But yeah, I think the other two ones have really good shots with Drake and VCU.
I will one more thing on this, and you can ask me this too. But if if you had to, what's of like the 1, 2, and 3 games, who is the most likely to get upset in the first round if one of those were to happen?
Um, I hate to say it, but it could be Kentucky. I think when we look at that, I just it stands out to me more than the other matchups. I think Wisconsin, they're sound enough defensively, and I think can keep Montana away enough to win that game. Iowa State's got enough talent outside of even Gilbert to handle Lipscomb. And then I think this is the first time UNC Wilmington's made the tournament, isn't it? Or is that the
No,
UC San
I
Diego?
remember. I remember they took Duke. They played Duke pretty well, like 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
and they lost, but they played them fairly well.
Yeah, I
But it's
like
been a
the
while, yeah.
yeah. So and I like the Big 12 teams. I think they've impressed me so far this year. As far as just I've seen a lot of their games. Really tough games. Texas Tech, Houston, Texas Tech, Kansas. So I feel pretty good about them. It's Kentucky that worries me the most. Really just because we've seen this before with them as a 3 seed. We've seen this same position and then get surprised. Last year was freaky with Oakland, and that I can't remember that guy's name that just lit them up from three
Golke,
point line.
yeah,
Golke, yeah, that was ridiculous. The guy was nearly 30. I mean,
yeah.
he probably shouldn't have been playing in college anymore, but what a game that was. But yeah, I would say Kentucky's the one that scares me the most. I think 1 seeds are fine. I don't think we should have any of those crazy, Virginia getting upset in the first round by the UMBC Retrievers or anything like that. But yeah, I'd say Kentucky.
So there's a Michigan State lost as a 2 seed several years, well, not too long ago, to Middle Tennessee. Uh, the issue with them that year is that for some reason the winner of the Big Ten tournament usually just performs poorly in the actual tournament. Illinois was like the first team in a while to actually do fairly well. I mean, Purdue 2 years ago won it and then lost as a 16 seed, and I think Wisconsin maybe the year before, and then they
Yeah,
got upset. No, Iowa the year before. Yeah, Iowa, and then they lost. So I think Michigan State. If I had to pick a 2 seed who might be, to be frank, I think all the 1s and 2s and probably the 3s will get by fairly easily. But you never know with Michigan State. They've had some great tournament performances in the past, and they've had some weak ones. But they did come up short in the Big Ten tourney, so I think that'll motivate them to do better.
right.
The Wisconsin Montana, I would say that, but Montana's not been a good tournament team. They've been in a few years in the past, but they've always been blown out. And
Yeah.
Wisconsin was upset last year, and they returned several guys from that team. So
Yeah, anytime a team has been a top power conference team gets upset, I usually pick them to at least get through the first couple rounds the
yeah,
following year. So I don't see them getting upset.
yeah. I would, if I had to pick, I'd probably just go Iowa State just because of the injury
The
situation.
injury.
Maybe they do come out terrible. We don't know, but I still think they'll be fine.
Well, for anyone picking their brackets, you got our final 4 picks, but looking at FanDuel for the odds to win the national championship, unfortunately, the Duke is favored, and that sucks because it probably means they're not going to win. And I picked them to win it all. They're at plus 280 right now on FanDuel. Following them is Florida at plus 390. Auburn at plus 500 and Houston at plus 600. And then there's a huge drop off. Once you get to the next grouping of teams, it's Alabama at plus 2,000.
Yeah, so Vegas kind of is thinking like us with our 1 seeds are a clear
Yeah.
tier above everyone else. Yeah, I mean, I had 3 1 seeds. How many 1 seeds did you have in the final four?
I had 2. Yeah, because
Yeah,
I had both Houston and Florida going down early.
yeah. So we both have confidence in 1 seeds as well. So yeah, I would say if you went with one of those 4 teams, that would be the right move. I would be more interested in doing Final Four bets than the national championship bets. I feel like you get more value out of some of the lines there for some
Yeah, I'm
teams.
just see if I can pull those up here real quick. Yeah, Final Four, we got, wow, Duke is minus 140. And
Yeah,
if that
yeah,
doesn't tell you how good
yeah.
their bracket looks for them, we mentioned that they look like they had one of the easier paths to the Final Four. They are the only minus uh, odds to make the Final Four, followed by Bama within their bracket at plus 440, which is interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, I assume does Bama have the lowest? Who has who has the highest odds for a 2 seed?
Yeah, that would be Bama. Yep,
Okay, yeah.
plus 440. And then it's Arizona at plus 800. Oh, excuse me, never mind. It's taking
You're just
from
looking
the
at
East region. Okay.
okay.
So we got so Duke is minus 140. Bama is plus 440 within the East region. In the South, Auburn is minus 105. Michigan State plus 490.
That could be good
So
value there because we talked about how easy Michigan State's path is to the Elite Eight, and if
yeah,
Auburn somehow tripped up,
yeah, and
yeah,
this makes me feel good. In the Midwest region, Houston is plus 120 to make the Final Four, while Tennessee is plus 370. So far that's the best 2 seed. Yeah, so it would be Tennessee that has as a 2 seed the best odds to make the Final Four because St. John's is plus 600.
yeah, I do like that Michigan State value.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, FanDuel. Those are odds from FanDuel. So put your picks in there and try to win some money. But that pretty much sums up everything I want to talk about within the NCAA tournament. You have any closing thoughts on what we might see?
No, I'm excited. I'm ready to get going. Like I said very early on in the podcast, Louisville Creighton's our opener, which is, well, in my opinion, one of the better first round games.
Yeah, and we get to open with that, which is great.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. Arguably the best 2 days of the sports season are Thursday, Friday opening rounds of NCAA
Basketball
tournament.
from 11 o'clock Central to shoot 10, 11 o'clock
Yeah,
for those West Coast
12
games.
hours basically. Yeah.
Yeah, basically 12 hours of basketball for 2 days straight. So yeah, um, so that'll close it out for us with college basketball. Just wanted to tap on NBA for a little bit. I know last week, you know, in the shuffle of college basketball games, it was maybe hard to pick out some things we saw from the NBA regular season. But the biggest thing, that stood out was Stephen Curry reaching 4,000 made threes, and the Warriors winning their sixth straight with it too. Just wanted to shout out and appreciate the greatness of Stephen Curry, I guess, because it's been an incredible career. All the titles and the individual accomplishments, just the greatest shooter we've seen ever, and it's right there in front of you with 4,000 made threes. No one even really close to that, and it just speaks to his preparation, his training, his ability to just make shots at such a high clip. And yeah, I think it was pretty cool to see him get 4K. The fans lit up in the Oracle Arena, and it was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, he revolutionized the game of basketball. No doubt about it. And 4,000 threes is nothing to scoff at. Um, yeah, for better or worse, he revolutionized the game because I think people have tried to replicate what he's done
Yeah.
uh, to mostly to failure.
Yeah, and you're
Uh,
seeing players all across the league now chucking up threes, and it's one of the complaints about the NBA and the TV product of it all, and why you see some of the ratings begin to falter nowadays with NBA regular season. It's just everyone chucking up threes or getting fast break
yeah.
dunks.
It's no
Yeah,
fault to his own. I mean,
right.
because he was so effective. He's so effective at doing it. It's just yeah. This isn't a diss on Steph Curry at all because
No, it's a diss on everyone else because they
it's a
can't
diss on
recreate it.
everyone else. Yeah, yeah. It's like trying to play like Shaq whenever you're not 7'1", 300 pounds.
Yeah, and you're like 150 pounds. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, truly incredible player. With the Butler acquisition, I think he's got maybe at least one more run in him.
Yeah.
I think the Olympics revitalized him because you could argue, and I was kind of in that boat. I was kind of arguing that he was kind of going downhill
Yeah.
where he was, but I think he's turned it around. He's back to him being himself. So yeah,
Yeah.
I was not a Warriors fan in the last decade, but I think I will be rooting for Curry to do well
Yeah, and
this.
it's just one of those things. Like you now see all the top teams now with the new talent. The Thunder, the Celtics, the Cavs, and for someone like us who grew up watching LeBron and Steph Curry and all these guys that are kind of part of our childhood watching NBA basketball. Now they're getting older. They're kind of getting their last hurrahs in the league to make a run at a title. I'm definitely gonna be rooting for them because they drive the ratings. they've carried the league for so long now, and it's pretty cool to see that they get another chance to play meaningful games, and I'm really glad to see them at this stage of their career still get to do that. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that. I know we saw a lot of other great games. Thunder, completing a season sweep of the Celtics. Thinking about that in a potential finals matchup with those two teams, possibly seeing the Thunder be able to take down the stacked roster of the Celtics, because I feel like they're built similar to them as well.
Yeah, regular season games are totally different. Playoffs totally different animal than regular season games, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander definitely played really well in both of those matchups, and like you said, OKC won both of them. So that is definitely something to monitor, because I would say that's probably the favored title matchup if you went on the betting markets. Rightfully so, because I don't think many people trust the Cavaliers with the Celtics, with the defending champs in their conference. So
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. The NBA, as we get closer to the playoffs, we'll go more in depth on some of the teams, kind of get a look at the playoff picture. But we with all the conference tournament stuff going on with college basketball, you might have missed some really good golf being played at TPC Sawgrass. So the player we mentioned in our last podcast about the Players Championship coming up, wanted to take a few minutes here and just appreciate some of the great golf that was played over the weekend. TPC Sawgrass is an iconic course, with that 17th island green. It was fun to just put the ESPN Plus feed of just that hole. They had a feed for just that hole as players just came through that part of the course, and see them just hold their breath every time they swung that club, and just waited to see if their ball would stay dry. Some of the big storylines that were created within this weekend were obviously Scotty, Xander, and Rory, the top three in the world rankings being grouped together. I feel like it delivered. We had some really good play those first couple days with those three. Obviously Xander coming off of an injury, still getting around to playing his best golf, but I think it was a good step forward for him to at least make the cut. And just knowing the cut being at 1 under, that's a tough cut to make. There were a lot of birdies being made out there by a lot of golfers. Usually you'll see cuts at like +2, +3. It seemed to be a pretty good first 2 days at TPC, because it seemed like the greens were pretty soft, and so they were getting a lot of backspin on those on those balls. And as you saw the tournament come day 3 on moving day, the greens had dried out, and you were getting huge rollouts off the shots that were just rolling right past the hole. So at that 1 under cut line, one of the coolest storylines was Justin Thomas. So in his first round, he put up a 6 over 78, which was way back from the leaders, way back from the cut. He had to really put something good together in round 2 to get back, and he puts up a 10 under second round. He actually made 11 birdies in his 18-hole round at TPC, and it was the largest turnaround in tournament history, and it actually tied the course record with that 10 under par. So he was able to make the cut, and it was put in a pretty good position to fight for the leaderboards. But come day 3 and 4, he wasn't. He faltered a little bit, but making that cut, and that was pretty special for him to do. Another player of note, Danny Walker. He was an alternate coming into the first day. Jason Day actually got sick. Needed someone to. They needed someone to put in for him, and they put Danny Walker in. And he got the call that morning, that Thursday morning, and then barely makes the cut. He shoots 1 under after 2 rounds, just slips in there to be able to play over the weekend. And he was in contention that final day. He was right there, -9, -10, right there, able to make a push. And he finishes tie for 5th, to be able to get some good payout there. But at the top of the leaderboard, it was really cool to see Rory put together a good players championship round to see one of the top players in contention at the end. That's what we always want with golf. We want to see the top guys in contention at the end because that just makes it more interesting. And he was up against JJ Spawn for the and a few other golfers as well. I know Akshay Bhatia and a couple other guys as well as Walker were in contention to win the players. When it got down towards the end, it was him and Spawn, JJ Spawn, and it ended up because of a huge rain delay that happened. They were out of play for about 4 or 5 hours. It came down to the end, and that putt on 18th for JJ Spawn on Sunday, that was a tough one to watch. It got so close, and it would have won him his first tournament this year. Ultimately, he parred that hole, so they had to do a 3-hole playoff Monday morning, and it didn't go well at all for him. I think maybe the nerves, the moment of going one-on-one, mano-a-mano against the great Rory McIlroy was a bit tough on him, and you could see the big change in the playoff was the 17th hole because they have to play 16, 17, 18. The island green really hurt him as he dunked one right in the water, went way past the green, and he couldn't believe it because he'd seen Rory hit a 9-iron right before him, and the wind was actually blowing into their face, and he ended up laying up with a 8-iron. And put a little bit too much on. I think the adrenaline got to him, and he just shot it way past the hole.
Yeah, that Island Green was brutal for a lot of golfers. So I didn't catch any of the Thursday Friday action. I started watching Saturday, and I was watching Lucas Glover. He eagled the 16th, and he had a bad lie. Like he chipped in his eagle for 16th, and had all this momentum because he was right there at the top, close to the top of the leaderboard. And then the 17th, yeah, he hit it right in the water.
Yeah, you could be having the
and on
best
the green
round
and
of your
rolled back.
life, and then that can just change the whole round for you. That 17th.
Yeah, but so yeah, that rain delay was pretty brutal because um, it was because the Spawn putt at the very end coming up just short, like I cutting to Rory watching that and as he was signing off his card. They're like, "Come on, we want this playoff now," but yeah,
Yep.
that rain delay made it happen today, as the day we're recording this, March 17th, this morning. And like you said, the 17th hole just brutal for Spawn. It hitting into the water that pretty much ended his run, but he did get a nice payday. Looking at
Yep.
the Rory made the 4.5 mil from this,
Yeah.
but Spawn earned a good 2.7. So not bad, but I'm sure he would have loved to have held that trophy. But we talked about this last week. Great tourney, brings out the best in everyone who's on the PGA Tour. Yeah, good for Schauffele making the cut. Yeah, he had a poor day 3 and 4, but a lot of
Yeah.
golfers did, to be honest.
Yeah.
And Scheffler wasn't able to be. There was no three-peat for Scheffler. He was another Kansas City Chiefs
Yeah.
like moment of failure of being a three-peat, but he had a decent weekend.
Yeah, he got to about 5 under, 6 under, but then kind of just stayed stagnant throughout the whole tournament. His putter really wasn't working. Just a lot of missed 10, 15 footers that would have really changed things if he was able to knock a couple of those down.
Which has been the knock on him in the past.
Yep.
He could be. I mean, you could argue he is all-time great, maybe already, but he
Yep.
could be if he was just like, was that last year? If he was just an average putter, he would have been insane.
Yep.
Like
And that's
Tiger
on
level.
top of the fact that he won so many tournaments last
Yeah,
year. Just it was
yeah,
his year, and it could have
yeah,
even been better.
yeah. But yeah. Putter's never been the strength for Scotty, but yeah, he had a decent day. But shout out to Walker.
That's such a cool story. Just to
Yeah,
just be, oh, yep, I guess I'm playing in the players, and then to just barely make the cut and be able to be in contention for the win at the
yeah.
end is pretty
He had
cool.
a great day 3. He had a shot of 66 on round 3. So
seem to
Yeah,
thrive on the drier
yeah,
course.
yeah, absolutely. But
But I definitely became a fan of a JJ Spawn throughout this tournament. The more they talked about him, he's been on the grind for many years, but especially this year. They mentioned the fact that he'd only been home for 1 week throughout the start of this PGA Tour. He's been going to every tournament each week, just grinding it out, and he's actually the first player this year on tour to with three top three finishes. So he's definitely up there in the points for the FedEx Cup standings. So he's done a really good job, and I think he could take a week off after this week.
yeah, and it's a shame how it went down this morning because he played like he came back yesterday because
Yep.
McElroy had a
Yep.
3-shot lead and Spawn clutched up and yeah, they came back and forced the playoff and yeah, that putt was just an inch or two short but that's golf.
Yep. Yep. But yeah, it was a lot of good stuff happening over the weekend. I know we had a few bits and pieces of news from the NFL that wasn't as heavy on the free agent news as it was last week. But a couple of things happened that the Falcons ended up keeping Cousins, which actually I forget what day it was. I believe it was the Monday or the Sunday of last week that after like 4 p.m. if the Falcons keep Cousins, they'd be triggered a guaranteed $10 million to him. So just interesting that they haven't at least released him to just be full send on Michael Penix Jr. But I just wonder why they're keeping him around. Cooper Kupp to Seattle on a 3-year deal. So now Sam Darnold's got himself a receiver. We'll see how that works out for them with a defensive head coach. Not sure how that'll work, but Darius Slay, the corner, going to Pittsburgh on a 1-year fully guaranteed $10 million deal. Still wondering where Aaron Rodgers is going to go. It seems like a lot of the rumors are sending him to Pittsburgh because of his relationship with Mike Tomlin. I guess they have a decent working relationship there. But yeah, it'll be interesting now that they've added another, high price talent on defense, which they just always seem to be doing, is paying a lot of money on their defense and then not being able to get their offensive line right. Bills signed Joey Bosa on a 1-year, $12.6 million deal. We'll see if that's 1 year. That might be half a year. We'll see if he's able to be available enough for them to use him effectively. But I'd say the biggest news came out more recently in the last couple of days is Cincinnati Bengals finally did something right. They extended both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Chase got a 4-year, $160 million deal with $121 million guaranteed. I believe that made him the highest paid non-quarterback in the history. After we just had that with with a Myles Garrett, but Chase went ahead and topped him on that. But then Higgins also got 4 years, 115 million guaranteed, or $115 million deal with the first 2 years guaranteed. So they've got their receivers. Burrow's got his guys for a good amount of time now, and they can really try to make something work. We'll see what happens with the defense.
So a quick rundown from the top since we're already going long here. The the Falcons thing, it's really a lose-lose for Cousins and the Falcons. The Falcons claim they wanted him to be the backup, but Cousins doesn't want that. Cousins wants to be a starter. But at this point, he has to be. The Falcons have to receive an enticing trade offer, but I don't know who would want to trade for Kirk Cousins right now at this point to be your starter. That'd be a hard thing to sell to your fan base. Cup to Seattle. I like it because you lost Metcalf, so you might as well go for
He's
somebody.
on the market.
But yeah, but yeah, there's been times like this in the past. Like I know skin color is probably what this comparison came to, but they compared it to like Jordy Nelson going to the Raiders, and
Okay.
it's kind of I can kind of see that. I think Cup's probably a little better than Nelson was at that point in his career, but we'll see. Yeah, Slade, the Pittsburgh, another upgrade of their defense. But their defense, despite how good their defense usually is, even when they sneak in the playoffs, they usually fall apart in the postseason too,
Yeah.
while also having a really poor offense. The Bosa signings, interesting. One thing you've you forgot to point out was that it was reported that the 49ers were actually nearing an agreement with him. So there was about to be a pairing of the two Bosa brothers,
The Bosa brothers.
but then at the last minute, the Bills swooped in and got him. Uh, you can't put much trust into him due to his unfortunate injury history. It's kind of depressing because when he used to be really productive, and he still kind of is, but you can tell that injuries have hampered his career. But yeah, the Bengals news, good for their offense. They're going to need to start winning now, because they might be in cap hell and financial hell here in a few years. There's like reports that they also are going to try to keep Hendrickson now. I don't know how that's going to work because he's going to demand a lot of money probably. And at this point, I don't know why you'd want to keep him whenever you had him last year. And despite how good he was, your defense was still really bad without him. So
yeah, they definitely should try to get some good assets back for him and try to get some draft picks that they can just load up on young talent on the defensive side.
Yeah, because they won't be able to afford any good defensive players in free agency or trades or anything like that now. So yeah, you got to trust in your scout team to find good young players to fill out a defense with, because yeah, with the Higgins and Chase locked up, yeah, that's a pretty elite trio right there with Burrow and his LSU buddy plus Higgins. So yeah, they'll be a fun team to watch again next year. There's already been memes about all their scores are going to be 90 to 90 something with how bad their defense is. But hey, that's entertaining, and the NFL's in the entertainment business, so I'm here for it.
Yeah, it should be interesting to see how they fare next season. Burrow got his wish; he got his receivers. Front office actually spent some money, so that's a good thing for their offense. But yeah, and then that'll pretty much end things for us. Just wanted to point out that the MLB regular season will be starting this week. We got Tuesday, Wednesday from Tokyo. The Dodgers and Cubs will be playing a couple of games out there to get the season started. And I like that they're getting it started a little early. They're playing some international games to help grow the game, and I think that's pretty cool. The real regular season starts when all the other teams play their first games on March 27th. So because of that, next week we will be doing a MLB preview, going through each division. We'll go division by division and kind of see where the standings will look at the end of the year, our picks for the World Series, and we'll just do a full-on preview, as well as for college basketball, obviously recapping some of the games over the weekend that really stood out to us. So that'll wrap it up for episode 2, and I'll say the thing I forgot to say on episode 1. If you're listening on YouTube, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening on Spotify, definitely give us a follow, and you'll be able to see all our content come through each week. That'll be it from the K&L Sports Huddle. I'm Cage Kiplinger. This is Logan Hubert. See you next time.